Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. This also happens to be the last one of the year. And it's about, can wireless access control really save me money? My name is Jeff Rushton and I'm the Chief Technical Officer here at Alarm Corp. For those of you that haven't joined us before, we'll just run through some general housekeeping. First and foremost, you're currently muted and you will remain muted for the remainder of the webinar. If you can see the presentation and hear me, if you could click the hand icon, it would be great, just to let me know that we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, excellent. You can put those hands down now. And we'll start. If at any stage you do have any questions, then if I could get you to type them in the question pane down the bottom there, and then hit the send key, that would be great. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll run through those questions and attempt to answer those for you. Okay, I suppose the topic was a bit of a catch, I guess. Can wireless access control really save me money? It's very much a leading question, I think. And I suppose before we can answer that, we need to ask a few questions, which we need to answer, of course, and our answers will really depend on each situation, and each situation potentially could be different. So as we run through, it's probably best to have a bit of a background and a bit of a summary on what's required for a standard hardwired door and the components that go along with that. Then we can have a bit of a look at the basics in terms of a wireless or an offline door. Then we might go into it, well, we will go into a little bit more detail on how those wireless and offline doors work, and whatever advantages and disadvantages that they may have. And unlike most of the webinars where we really don't talk pricing, we need to talk about pricing if I'm going to indicate how we can save money with a wireless system. So we will go through the general street prices for hardwired and wireless products, and we'll do a bit of a comparison towards the end of this webinar. And then after we've done that, we'll have a look at the factors that we need to take into consideration when we select the type of system that is either required or that we're going to offer. Okay, so we've got here our very typical hardwired access control door. In most cases, there'll be some form of door monitor, typically a reed switch, and that reed switch, of course, may change depending on the construction of the door that we're talking about. Typically, there'll also be some form of egress button or switch. What's shown there is an exit PIR, but it could just simply be a push button to get through. In all cases, there'll be some form of electronic lock, or a door strike, an escutcheon, a magnetic lock that's shown here. That will very much depend, again, on the type and construction of door that we're looking at protecting. As well as then at least a single entry reader, or potentially there may be an exit reader on the other side of the door as well. All of these things get wired to some form of reader interface. Maybe at the door. This may be located not so far away in an equipment cupboard with other interfaces from other doors. But let's assume for the purpose of this that it's at the door. So we've got our reed switch, our egress button, our lock, our reader. Potentially, depending on the brand or the type of unit, it may be able to accept other alarm inputs, like it's shown here. And certainly may be able to have additional outputs. In this case, we have one that is a local door alarm, that if the door is forced or held open, it can set off a sounder at the door location itself. The interface that we're showing here, in fact, for the next couple of slides, this is based on our Siemens SyPass access control system. All access control systems are different to some degree, but the basic terminology and structure doesn't vary typically that much. So in this case, we've got all of these things wired back to our reader interface in this case. Our reader interface, along with lots of other reader interfaces from other doors, will generally go back to some form of smart controller or potentially the main unit. In the case of Siemens SyPass, it's called an ACC, which is an Advanced Central Controller. And this holds all of the card holders, all of the decision-making parameters that go to allow access at each of the doors connected to it. This device is then hardwired or connected to the Ethernet bus or the local network that you've got there, and we can see our ACCs on this complete diagram here. At the very least, now I've got here a typical access control system. Maybe this isn't so typical. This would be a full boots and all, every option enabled system. But in its basic form, you've got your controllers, as we've got here. There'll be some PC or server and a workstation for programming and obviously having the software on. We can see our reader interfaces up the top on this bus and our readers that we saw on the last slide. So you require all of those things, from the reader interface through to the ACC or the controller, and then through to the PC system with your software and obviously your keyboard and mouse and screen hanging off it. So that's rather typical of a hardwired access control system. When we look at a wireless or an offline system, if we have a look on the right, and I've really done a horrible circle around it, that lock on the right hand side that says Salto offline door lock encompasses everything on that first slide. It has the reed switch built in, the door strike, for want of a better word, the egress, the reader, the smarts that go with it. That's all that's required on the door. How do we get this information back to our software or our access control system? Well, the only thing we need to add is a thing called a wireless gateway, and that's sitting on the Ethernet bus and then talks to our software and everything else that we've got. So in this particular slide, we're showing adding a wireless door to an existing hardwired access control system. So in this case, we still have our reader interface at the top, our hardwired readers, our ACC controller, but now we've just added our wireless locks. If we were to say, well, let's just look at a wireless system only without any hardwired doors, we can make this look a much simpler diagram. So as we can see here, we've got our lock or our locks. Over here, there's literally as many of these as we want. We have one or more wireless gateways, depending on where these locks are located. They need to be within the range of the door. That's connected to our local network. And then we've got our PC running some software and maybe potentially a workstation hanging off that to do all your programming. In the case of, and I can really only talk about the products that we sell and a little bit in general, the offline products that we'll be talking about come from a company called Salto Systems. They're a Spanish company, and they sell a range of, well, we sell a range of their products that work both standalone or with our Siemens SyPass access control system. So in this case, for a fully wireless system with no hardwired components, this drawing that we've got here pretty much encompasses everything that you need. The only thing I haven't mentioned here is these systems work on MyFair cards, so you do need to have a card encoder on site to program and issue your cards to, staff and employees. When we look at an offline or a wireless lock, they can look, I suppose, like anything on this page. They come in a variety of styles, from narrow style to standard style to working on glass doors to working as an exit panic button, or the unit down in the bottom left can replace any Lockwood cylinder lock and turn that immediately into a offline or now a wireless controlled electronic cylinder. To look at how the wireless works in a slightly different way is we have our wireless escutcheon locks on all the required doors. We have our gateway, which is only got two things. It's typically plugged into power and plugged into the network, or it is available in a PoE version, in which case it just plugs directly into the network. It requires nothing else. You can add more wireless gateways, or you can add a wireless repeater. A wireless repeater simply just plugs into power, and all it does is do what the name suggests, repeats. Whatever information it gets from the lock, it just repeats to the gateway. So it basically allows you to extend the wireless range between the distance between the gateway and the wireless escutcheon lock. In the place where you do have network running throughout a building, I would suggest that you just put in multiple gateways all sitting on the network, and then they can pick up all of your wireless locks regardless of where they're located. And then of course you have some form of platform, a PC running some software. In the case of a fully standalone wireless or offline system, it would simply be the Salto software. In the case of a larger integrated system that includes hardwired doors and maybe lots of those other things we saw on one of the previous slides, it would be with Siemens SyPass, and that can accommodate all the variants of this product. If we just look a little bit more in depth with the Salto wireless, just a couple of slides here to describe, I suppose, how wireless typically works and the benefits that the Salto wireless does offer. It really is bidirectional, and we'll show how that works in a sec. It can handle up to 64,000 users and 64,000 doors in a single system. And we can utilize this with what we call offline or wireless readers, and we'll describe the difference between those two in the coming slides. But when you're talking about a wireless escutcheon, it gives you all of the same controls you can with a hardwired system. That is, you can delete users, you can check the lock, you can put time control and get real-time events from it, as well as track obviously users around the building. So exactly the same sort of features you get from a hardwired site. On the coming slides, when we talk about how the card technology works, Salto have got their little acronym, which I haven't listed here, called SVN, or Salto Virtual Network. And it uses a process that they call data on card. In 2 slides' time, we'll run through exactly how that works, but it's used on both their standalone version of their product and their wireless version of their product. If you've got their standalone version, they can be upgraded to be a wireless device later on. And all of their wireless escutcheon locks just operate on 3 standard AA batteries. So nothing special, very easy to replace and have a long lifespan. When we talk about the wireless component of their system, it uses the same frequency, the same standard that all of your network wireless enabled devices use. So, you know, your laptops, your phones, your tablets, all of that sort of stuff. They don't talk to a standard wireless modem. That's why you need the Salto wireless gateway, but they operate on exactly the same frequencies. I suppose the difference between them is that the Salto wireless network operates on 120-bit encrypted AES standard, so for the maximum security that you can have over a wireless communication. But we'll just have a look on this next slide. So we've got a Salto wireless card, a card. It's a MyFair card, that is a card that can hold data, and the readers can read the data from the card and also write data to the card. So let's just look at what we would call an offline system, not a wireless system. This is just a lock on a door that's battery powered, and we're badging now our Salto card at this door. Just like any access control system, the reader will ask the card who it is, and the card will respond with typically its card number. That's pretty much where the comparison between a hardwired door and an offline or a wireless door ends in this particular scenario. Because now, the next question that the door asks, typically in a hardwired system, the door is connected to a controller that's connected to a computer, and it's the one giving access. It's referring to its database, and it's saying, aha, John Smith, you are or you aren't authorized for this particular door. In the case of these offline readers, they've got nothing to refer to. So it asks the card, are you authorized? And it's the card that has the details that says, yes, I am authorized for this particular door, or no, I'm not. Just as a hardwired access control system can work between certain times, the Salto card reader only knows what time and date it is. The card knows what times that card is meant to operate. So as long as the times on the card match within the time that it currently is on the card reader, access will be granted or denied based on that. So based on that criteria, the card reader says, cool, access is granted based on that criteria. I'm now going to log the audit trail both in the lock itself, and I'm going to copy that to the card. So the card now has got a copy of the audit trail of where it's been used. The lock can also send other messages. So in this case, the lock is saying, hey, I'm sending a message that my batteries probably need to be replaced soon. The card responds with, cool, I've got all of that. I've got a message for you, Mr. Lock. Tim Simmons has lost his card, so don't open it if it shows up. So logged or stored on this card is what we call a blacklist, a list of all of the cards in the system that have been lost, voided, out of the site. So at every card badge, the card is updating the reader with the latest information on whose cards should be ignored or voided if presented. So all this works well and good, but we've got all this information on the card. How do we get that information on the card back into our software, back into our program? And how do we update that card with new information to send out to the card readers? Although we've said that it's an offline system, or potentially even a wireless system, there has to be on this system at least one or potentially a number of hardwired readers or updating points, or what we call hotspot readers. And that's a reader that's hardwired, it's online all of the time, and that potentially or normally would be at the entry or the exit of a building, or maybe the entry or an exit to the car park, or maybe near the lift, someplace where the staff have to badge, and they have to badge at least once a day, preferably the more times a day the better. So when a card is presented at one of these online hotspot readers, we go through much the same process. The reader asks who you are, it gives its card number, it says where have you been. It now dumps a list of the audit trail of everywhere that it's been since the last time that it was badged at a hotspot reader onto the reader, and then it gets uploaded directly into the history of the software. Have you got any more information? This is where now it also sends some maintenance message saying that that room 101 has got low battery. So now it gets presented to an operator on the screen, and they can action that message. During the time that this card was presented to a hotspot reader, though, or during the last time, someone has gone in and updated John Smith's details and given him access to a new room. In that same time, Mrs. Smith has phoned in and said, I've lost my card, and the operator has voided it on the software. When we've badged this card at one of these hotspot readers, our card now has been updated with our new access criteria or details, as well as now our card has been updated with the latest blacklist. So as we go around and continue to use this card at other offline readers, those readers will get updated with that blacklist. So the second that Mrs. Smith's card turns up and gets attempted to be used in one of these readers, it will be denied access. And certainly now if we went to room 102, we would now have access where we didn't have access before. From this we can see that that Salto's terminology of what they call a virtual network pretty much holds true, that the card now is the network, not the wires that potentially would be used in a hardwired system. There's certain advantages here. One obviously is the lack of cable. Two, as we'll see later, is an advantage in price. The disadvantages though would be that from here we can see that if we have a door that is very important to us and it needs to be secured, and we need to know at any given time and be able to pull an audit trail out from that door, is that if we did this with an offline reader, that audit trail more than likely isn't going to be up to date. It would need to have all of the cards badged at a hotspot reader by a certain time and then a report run after to ensure that that audit trail that we've done on this particular door includes all of the activity. If that's an issue to you, the system does come with a little handheld programmer. You can go down to that door, upload the entire event log, bring it back to the computer, upload it into the software, and then do a report. But of course that involves an additional step that you wouldn't have in a hardwired system. The other thing that needs to be at least acknowledged here is, let's just say that you do have a bunch of these higher security doors, and that the second a card is lost, like in the case of Mrs. Smith, that you void that card immediately from your software, but it's not voided immediately from all of your offline locks. It's only voided when a card is badged at a hotspot reader and then badged at any one of the other readers on the system. Again, there's a way you could get around that, as if I know that the managing director's door is a very high security door and his card has been lost and I want to ensure that that card will no longer operate in that door, I can remove it from the system, take my card, badge it at a hotspot reader, then walk over to his door, badge it at his door. Now his door will be updated with that blacklist, and if his card ever turns up, it will deny access. That may not obviously always be convenient in some instances. So there are certain trade-offs with an offline system that you wouldn't have with a, let's say, a hardwired system. One of the other things to consider is an offline door does not do alarms. There is no alarm reporting. There's nowhere for the alarm to report to. So again, if getting an alarm from a door, if it's forced open, or if a void card is used, or if it's held open too long, then an offline door or an offline reader on that door would not be the best choice. So when we come and evaluate a job or an installation that we need to do a quote for, there's a few, they're only basic questions, but they're things that we need to ask ourselves and potentially ask the customer. What does the customer require on that door? Is it just to simplify their access control requirements, maybe to replace keys that are cumbersome? Do they really want an audit trail on that door on who's gone through it and when and how? Do they want to receive an alarm from that door if it's been forced open or held open too long? Is the access control on that door required? In other words, it has to be there? Or is it only going to be installed if it's cost effective? Cost effective is a big bad word, but the end user, the customer typically, or the consultant will know that a particular door is required to have access control on it, or, oh geez, if access control's too dear, I'll just put a key, or I'll just leave the key system in there. If it is required on the door, then what's the motivation? It could be some of the points above, that they want an audit trail, that they want to remove keys and have a simplified way of adding and removing staff. They maybe want alarms off that door. But if it's optional, is it due purely just to budget, to price? Because it might be simply an option to putting in an offline or a wireless system as opposed to putting in a master key system. And this master key system is going to come up a fair bit on the next few slides. Once you ask those basic questions, and no doubt lots of other questions that go along with this, you would compile your list of takeoffs, you would include all the required components and all of the optional ones, and then we'll see how we can best accommodate those requirements and potentially any budget constraints that may exist. So let's have a look. If we look at a wireless card reader, it offers us real-time audit trail, real-time updating of access privileges, information that goes in, real-time alarms and door open too long alarms, real-time door operation, that is, we can open and lock doors remotely. In a nutshell, it offers everything that a hardwired card reader can do. As discussed, with an offline card reader, our audit trails are there, but they potentially could be delayed. and they're delayed by however long it takes for someone to badge at a hotspot reader to update. The updating of access control information is also delayed. We can change the access control requirements, but it might take minutes, it might take hours for it to relay down to the door. As I said before, no alarms from an offline reader system. And you get no real-time door operations. You can't open or lock down a door remotely. We can have that door on a time schedule, so it's available or not available or open or closed, but if we need to change it, we need to physically go down to the door and plug in our programmer. The next point isn't fully valid, it's just simplified. I've said that an offline system is basically what a master key system can offer, but it has an audit trail. It most definitely has an audit trail. It does a lot more than a master key system. You know, you can't enable and disable access or change access privileges with a master key system without calling in the locksmith. Here you can do it from your PC. But again, I want to look at an offline system in the same way that you would look at a master key system. And I think that's what I put down here. Why both? Not all your doors, your cupboards, your lockers, whatever else that you're protecting requires to have a full online access control system. In a typical site, can you imagine how many mechanical locks there are compared to hardwired access control doors? You know, I've said 5%. I think I've been very generous. I reckon in your average facility, probably 2% of the doors have got access control on them, and everything else has got a key. You know, why do they have keys and not access, and full electronic access control? I could guarantee in just about every case, it's cost, or what is perceived to be cost. So when we sit down and work out what we need and compare a hardwired door with these other two types of doors, we'll obviously start with our takeoffs to do our equipment list. So with your hardwired door, what do you need? You need a card reader of some type. You need a reader interface, a door stripe, a maglock, some way of securing the door, some form of door contact, reed switch, an egress button or an exit detector, and the cable associated with wiring the door at the door. I've got pricing here. You might be looking at this and saying, oh, Jeff, $500, that's ridiculously cheap. Or you might be saying, Jeff, $500, that's so dear, it's not funny, I can do it for whatever. I'm not aiming at giving necessarily a true reflection of what it costs either the end user or the installer. I'm just doing a comparison at the same level between hardwired and wireless. So if $500 is cheap to you, then the wireless will seem even cheaper. You can put it up by whatever percentage or down by whatever percentage that you need. So that's equipment cost. And I've got here labour. I've said 4 hours at, let's say, $80 a door, at the door, plus someone potentially to come in and install the strike. All adds to the price of the labour at the door. So I've said that it comes to $970, $1,000 worth of equipment and labour at the door for a hardwired system. But hang on, we haven't wired that back anywhere yet. So now we've got to wire that door back onto the main system. So at the very least it's going to add another couple of $100 onto the top of that. So it could be $1,100 or $1,200 to get a single hardwired door onto your system. It potentially could be substantially more. As I've said though, there are a lot of variables in a hardwired system. The ease of cabling, the type of lock required, the installation on different door types, etc., all change your quotation, your hours, and obviously the cost to the user. There are some things there you can absolutely quantify. That is all of the equipment once you've picked the equipment to use. Installation can, as we all know, can be a little bit hit and miss. You might underestimate the amount of hours. So regardless of the amount of money that you pick for the installation, network has died. Okay, I don't know if everyone else is online. If you could just raise your hand again, please. Looks like we've lost network here for a little bit. When I see some hands raised, I'll continue. So again, I don't know if you can hear me now. Our network was just lost. If you could raise your hand if you can hear me again. Okay. I don't know how long I was off. I apologise for that. Looks like we're back online. So based on that, I don't know how far we got before my voice and possibly picture cut out, but I'll start from the bottom line here for our hardwired system. I said there was a lot of variables on this. So, you know, how easy, how difficult install and labour is can vary, and that can be an unknown. The type of lock that's required, how you're going to install it on a particular door. We can quite happily quantify the equipment used, but labour potentially could be something that we lose out on. So although we come up with a particular price to install a hardwired door, the amount of margin that we make on that may depend on how easy or how difficult the installation is. When we look at a wireless door, our equipment list now is considerably less. We've got a wireless lock. That wireless lock potentially could be somewhere between $450 to $600, or if it's an offline lock, about $100 cheaper, $350 to maybe $500. Installation potentially should only take 30 minutes, probably less if you're doing quite a few of them. So I've said allow, let's say $80 for that. So in the case of a wireless lock, we're looking at maybe $700 per lock maximum, maybe as little as $450. Also, not only on the lock on the door and the install we need a wireless gateway. So that's about $300 for every 16 locks that we install. So if we put this all together and have a look at a quick spreadsheet, for whether it be 10, 20, 50 or 100 doors, we now get a pretty good impression that wireless is costing us about 30% cheaper than an equivalent hardwired door. And if it was an offline door, it's about 40% cheaper. I guess if we just looked at these figures alone, I've convinced you that we should be putting in wireless and offline doors. From the figures here, it's probably a little bit hard to talk you into hardwired doors, but I'm actually going to here. That to summarise what we've got with our hardwired, wireless and offline doors, we've seen that wireless is cheaper, but we really do need to qualify all of the points that we've discussed on the previous slides with the advantages and disadvantages of each, but also to be very mindful of a few other key points. And one is that with Salto, all of their wireless doors are escutcheon locks, and they may not be appropriate for every situation. In fact, they're typically only good for a standard internal door construction. They're not good for outdoor use. They're not good for anything that has electronic control on. So auto opening doors, car park, lift, anything that's already got an electric strike on. You can't utilize an escutcheon lock in any of those situations. So I'm going to say that on any of those other doors, a hardwired door is not only recommended, but would probably be required on here. Another thing to consider, each of those components on a hardwired door, everything from the reed switch to the exit button, to the reader type, to the lock type, any one or all of those can be changed according to the door type, the door construction, the environmental conditions, so we can really customize a hardwired door to be, well, very reliable and to be fit for purpose. We may not have that option with a wireless system. With our wireless system as well, our card technology has to be MyFair for this system to work. MyFair may not be the chosen card technology either on an existing or a new site, so that's something else to consider. Might sound a little bit silly. Batteries will require replacement. No more often so than you'd go out there and do a normal maintenance check on a hardwired system, but the point still stands. It is a wireless system. It runs on batteries. They do need to be replaced and checked. And unlike a typical hardwired access control system where it already has more than likely a master key system on it, and that master key is put in a key cupboard and locked up, and then everyone uses their cards, and then if the lock fails or if the reader fails, they can happily pull that key out and go down to the door and open it. With an escutcheon lock, you don't have that luxury. If the lock mechanism malfunctions, then you ain't going to get through that door unless you have an alternate method of entry. So it makes access on failure a lot more difficult with an escutcheon lock. So to sum up what we've looked at in one short sentence, the way that I personally, and this is my personal opinion as opposed to anything else, I would look at a wireless or an offline lock in exactly the same way that most people would look at a mechanical lock. That is, any mechanical lock, if it can be replaced to offer the advantage of an electronic access control system, and it won't have the same operational problems experienced with a master key system. Maybe to explain that a little bit better than I've written it, is if you talk to any security manager or any building manager, one of their key beefs, one of the things that they can never manage 100% efficiently is their master key system. It might go in relatively economically when they put it in, but the second you lose a key, the second that you've got to call someone in to replace, whether it be one lock, but in some cases after the key has been lost a few times, it might have to be to rekey the whole system. Then the management of that key system, who's got the key, when did they return it, have they still got it, who's got it now, gives you enormous operational problems and enormous security problems. We've looked at that these offline locks really aren't that much more expensive than someone coming out and putting in a cylinder on a door. It's probably 30-40% dearer, but once it's installed, no one never needs, other than replacing the batteries, no one never needs to go back there to rekey it or to replace the cylinder. So over time, over 12 months, 2 years, and the typical time that we've calculated is probably somewhere between 2 and 3 years, that an offline locking system will repay its value now, twofold, threefold over a master key system after that period of time. and it's much, much easier to manage. So I would say that when you're looking at an access control system, the majority of doors, if not all of the doors, I would consider still would be hardwired, but then you look at those other components where someone would never consider putting a hardwired reader simply because of the cost. And that could be on a locker, a cupboard, some form of other cabinet, a general office door, something where access control is required, i.e. a key lock, but where electronic access control was not considered because they believed that it was too expensive. So I believe if you target those sorts of applications with your offline locks particularly, and to some degree the wireless locks, you'll be able to accommodate the high security requirements of your required access control doors and the optional doors that you can add by replacing a typical key system. Hopefully that cutout of the internet hasn't caused us too much grief. If you'd like to know more information, best place to go initially would be our Alarm Corp website. From there you can check out our products, subscribe to our newsletter, register online for pricing and further technical information on our products, or you can happily contact any of the people listed on this slide, including myself down the bottom. And if you have a moment, when the next time you're on Facebook, LinkedIn or Twitter, just search for Alarm Corp and either like or follow us. We have lots of interesting feeds and information come up on those sites, which is totally left field from what you see in our webinars. We've got a list here of, I might have just passed that, sorry, of all of the webinars that we've had this year. As I said, this one here is the last one. And all of our CCTV webinars that we've had, the last one was last week. As it is at the moment, this is it for this year. We should have a new schedule for next year by about the end of January. But if you want to register for any of the future ones that may come up, or to view any of these webinars that we've held in the last 12 months, then just go to our website, look for the resources tab, and then click on webinars, and you'll be able to view any of those that we've done previously. As always, if you come along to our webinar, we give you some specials, which is an additional 10% off your already discounted pricing, as long as you use the code NOVWeb14 on checkout. That applies to all of our products other than our SiPass, Sony and Verint products. So now, if you do have any questions, now would be a good time to type them in and we can run through. Okay. Someone said, how long do the batteries last? Actually, I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Salto documents say that a offline lock will work to about 45,000 activations before the batteries need replacing, and a wireless lock about 40,000 transactions. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, someone's also now asked, can we combine hardwired, wireless and offline doors in the one system? The answer is yes, we can. In our case, we use the Siemens SiPass access control system, which is a hardwired product. We can happily add both the offline and the wireless Salto product onto our system, and all of them will operate as one system. Is there any catches or hidden costs when quoting a wireless system? I don't like to leave things out, so no. There's no hidden costs with this product at all. It really is as simple as I've shown it. Some things that I didn't demonstrate, but I guess should be pointed out. I did show you that for a Salto system that you require a MyFair card programmer. That was in one of the slides. And I did talk about a portable handheld programmer. That's required as well, not required, but beneficial as well, that you, when you set up a lock initially, or if you do want to retrieve the audit trail, that you just plug in this little device that you hold in your hand, punch a few buttons, and it will either program the lock or upload the audit trail so you can view it on your computer. But that's it. There's nothing else to it, and there's no additional cost. Someone else has asked that I did neglect to mention earlier. What is the maximum distance that a wireless lock can work from the gateway? Salto documentation says about 50 metres. So from an escutcheon to the wireless gateway is about 50 metres. And a wireless gateway can talk to up to 16 locks. So if you've got 16 locks within 50 metres of the gateway, you're fine. If you don't, no big problem. You can add as many more wireless gateways or repeaters as needed to give you the coverage on the site. And there's no limit to those. So distance ultimately now is no longer a problem. You can have wireless locks all over your building, just so long as you install as many wireless gateways as required. Don't know if there's anything else coming through. Doesn't look like it at the moment. So on that note, certainly like to thank you for your time here today. Certainly appreciate the time out of your schedule to come and attend one of our webinars. As I've said, this is the last one for the year. It seems a little bit silly to say Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year now, but I will. So I hope you enjoy your time off over Christmas, and we certainly look forward to seeing everyone back probably early in February, I would say, as it is now. So thank you very much for your time, and goodbye.